Alright, cool. Alright, camera set, camera's focused. Cool. Hey everyone, and welcome to quick bit of prep for it's chapter 2. I finally saw it, and because we covered the first chapter back 2 years ago, I figured I'd talk to Patrick. There he is now, apparently.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, so you saw the movie, right?
I saw it. I got my ticket and everything.
Hey, let me see that.
Yeah.
We're talking about chapter 2.
The one with the kids fighting the clown, sewer, kid in the raincoat and stuff. That one?
No, it's them as adults. They're coming back.
Thought we talked about it before.
Yeah, why did you think we talked about the same movie twice?
We do a better job this time?
Okay, ouch. But just turn around.
I'll just take my ticket and leave.
No. We're going to see the movie, and we're going to talk about this. We talked about this.
Oh, okay, I like that idea better.
So, I'll grab... Sorry, guys. Apparently, we have to go see the movie. So, I'll see you in about 3 hours. Okay, so, like I told you, it was a different movie. Chapter 2. 27 years later. They're adults.
Yeah, it didn't feel like 27 years later to me.
Shut up. Just sit on the couch. And let's just get this over with.
They didn't even ask for my ticket.
That's from the... Never mind. Okay? So here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to try and stick to general stuff, for the first part, and then we'll establish spoilers, blah, 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 at a certain point.
Spoiler free.
So, for right now, spoiler free. Just in case you haven't seen it. It's been out for at least 2 weeks. Yeah. 2 weeks, 10 days, whatever, at this point. So, first off, general, one of the big things I want to say is if you've seen the miniseries, you know at least the big general things that happen. This character goes, deals with this character unfortunately doesn't make it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not saying it's bad, this movie's bad because of that, but they execute things differently, so it's worth seeing if you're interested.
It's closure to part 1.
Yeah. Honestly, overall, Pat and I feel a bit differently about, our rating for the movie. I feel like it is good, but there are just so many elements that bring it down a bit. I would say it's a high, for the star rating thing, 3 stars out of 5, a high one. Because it's a good, solid story. It's interesting. But the big thing that kills it for me is the 3-hour runtime. Well, 2 hour 49 minutes compared to the first movie, which is 2 hours and 19 minutes. And basically, they could have just cut so many different things. They added some things in that just stretch the runtime out, and you feel that 2 hours and 49 minutes, yeah, unfortunately.
It's a lot of padding.
Also, and this is just a small thing, some of the comedy bits at times were out of place. They didn't kill the movie, but they were just odd. And I'm trying to think what my last general thing was. I can't think of it now, but did you have any general thoughts before we get into spoilers?
General thoughts? I thought the character development was interesting. I really liked the things that they did differently than the miniseries and the book. But there's a lot of things where I thought they just, like we said earlier, it just padded out. They took away important character elements from the book and from the original miniseries, and they just added their own just to do it. The skateboard kid not being an important one in the book or the miniseries, that's an example of something they padded, whereas I think they could have done more with other characters.
Right.
With, pre-spoiler.
Okay, so with that established, we're already through spoilers within 5 minutes, probably. So from here on out, we are free to talk about spoilers. I'm gonna try and keep it. I'm going to try and keep my stuff in order of how it happened in the movie as possible. I may make some mistakes, though, just saying. So, bear with us on that. So, one of the first things that I really liked in this was, they have the scene at the Chinese restaurant like they did in the miniseries and maybe in the book also. But, that was cool and interesting. Obviously, some crazy stuff happens, like all these weird things come out of the fortune cookies.
Yep.
And, it's obviously computer graphics, because this day and age. But it was cool and interesting. Like, it was a cool thing to see, but one of the things I also liked that we had at the Chinese restaurant was, everybody was like, oh man, dude, I forgot about, like, being a kid and hanging with you guys. Like, everyone else who had left Derry had forgotten everything.
Yes.
So, like, unlike the miniseries where it was just like, oh, hey, I haven't seen you guys in, like, 20 years. What's going on, dudes? Like, that was a cool little elements to this story. Like, they'd gone away. Patrick told me about, like, how in the book everyone was so successful.
Yeah.
Like, Bill's still an author. Ben's an architect. I forget what everybody else.
The movie followed it pretty close. Like, Bev was the fashion designer. Richie was the comedian and everything. The one thing that I didn't like that they changed in this one is instead of being in the book, Eddie's a limousine driver, whereas he caters to, like, high profile, celebrities and stuff, whereas this he was like risk management. And that's an interesting thing, but they didn't go over why that would be important. Like, everyone else is super successful, and it feels like it wanted to keep them away, give them a successful, like, no reason to go back to Derry. Except for Eddie, where it's like, hey, you just have a really important job and you get paid a lot. It's not, like, fulfilling or anything. He doesn't talk about it, he doesn't go over it. It's just kind of like a note thrown in so we know that he has a job.
Yeah, because I mean, like, compare him to characters like Richie, who's a, famous comedian, traveling the world, sold out shows. Bill, the writer, who's working on a movie. But he's like, you know what, I'm going to leave for 3 days because this guy called me and said, hey, you should come back to Derry, Maine. This just small, tiny town for some reason. Like, yeah. So that point is very confusing, like you said.
And to that point, like, he leaves his wife and everything. He leaves the director. They say, you need to come up with an ending. You need to write a new ending. He gets a phone call and just leaves the set. And that's not addressed ever again. Like, and it's just weird to me because they do cycle back at the end with Aftermath. And that's never brought up. It's like, oh, hey, they shot the movie without you. And they came up with their own ending. And, but they don't do it. Like, just felt kind of lackluster.
Yeah, and then going off of, everybody met up at the Chinese restaurant. Right after that, Bev calls Stan's house looking for him because he's supposed to be with everybody, but unfortunately, if you've seen the miniseries, if you've read the book, he did unfortunately kill himself, which is very tragic, very, very serious thing. And honestly, like that moment created such a good fracture to everybody. Like, everybody's like, dude, if he didn't show up, like, if he...
Yes, they
like,
nailed
I'm
that
out.
part. Yeah.
Like, everybody just splits off. Like, Bill and Mike go back to Mike's place, above the library or wherever he was staying at.
Yeah, he's the only person that's willing to stay.
Yeah, because, like, Mike is the one who stayed in Derry, like, to make sure it didn't come back 27 years later. Unfortunately, it obviously did. And I did like the scene, in the very start, establishing, like, oh, hey, like, it is back. It was a bit graphic and harsh, but it was a good setup. Like, oh, hey, this person's in trouble, sees the strange clown guy on the shore, thinking, I'm going to be saved. Nope.
Yeah.
But,
and that's from the book, which I really liked, that they use an element of the book, because it is, very graphic and very, it's... a social commentary on these people in the 80s and stuff. And, they modernized it, obviously. But, I mean, in the book, it's supposed to be very, bigotous characters do this horrendous thing, and then tragedy happens, and it's like... It's good that they were able to approach that in the right way. And I think it added to the story. It wasn't anything bad. It was a couple of assholes.
Yeah.
Excuse my French. But they, and then Pennywise shows up.
Yeah. And, like, we get to learn a bit about, like, what Mike's been up to the last 27 years, like, just doing all this research, trying to figure everything out. Like, he hung out with, the native tribe people.
Yeah.
Basically Native Americans, and, like, went through this ritual they had going on, and he learned about the, ceremony of Chud, however you pronounce it.
I know.
And, like, basically, how he portrays that information to Bill. unfortunately by drugging him, but like that was an interesting little scene.
That was so frustrating because that's part of the original book is they do this by reading about Native Americans and everything, and they do it when they're children and they get the image of, you know, the trial or whatever, which is different in the book. But they see a lot of different things. They see where it originated, everything like Bill does. And they took a lot of elements of it. But one thing that I didn't like, and we'll probably touch this later, or maybe this will be all we need to touch, is Mike is like my second favorite character out of the entire Losers Club, and in the book and in the original miniseries, you know, they make him into this like noble character who's willing to stay behind and do everything for everyone else. You go on and live your life. I'm going to be the lighthouse that brings everyone back if this thing shows up again. And it does, and then they kind of make him into a bad guy by him drugging Bill and him lying to them. You know, we'll get into that part later, but like they paint him as like a bad guy, and you don't need to do that. That's what was frustrating to me. Is like the first movie made him into an outsider, and he never really is one of them. Like until the Rock fight, and then even after that, he's not in it very much. He's just kind of a background character, like Stanley was. Whereas like in the book, in the original series, they are part of the crew. Like it didn't feel separated. Right. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, and I think like part of that could be just because it's a movie and you've got 7 characters to try and follow.
That's true.
Like Bill's heavily invested in this because his brother Georgie was killed by this thing.
Yep.
You know, Ben was the one doing the research that kind of kicked off this investigation. Like, oh crap, like what's going on here? You know, and then like a few other characters like have their big reasons for being involved in this. Like Stan, he was definitely a very much on the outside character, and again, like we'll probably be talking about him more towards the end because how the movie ends if you've seen it, but and you know Mike was kind of on the outside too, but anyway, so you know Mike and Bill go to review the stuff that Mike's found. Like I know how to stop this thing, and like they do catch everybody back at the hotel, and they, you know. They kind of come back together. Like, basically, like, you know, Bev explains to them her visions of, like, oh, I've seen, you know, like, you know, I had visions after being attacked, you know, because I saw the deadlights and all that stuff. And basically just establishes, if we don't do this now, like, we will not be around to stop it in 27 years when this thing comes back again. You know, not just because you're going to be 70, but within that 27-year period, you're probably going to go insane like Stanley did, because, you know, having that monster, like, wrap its jaws around your face, you know, like, it's pretty intimidating, especially if you're, like, a 12-year-old kid, you know, who was supposed to, you know, fight this monster with your friends, but they left you.
Yeah, at least that's how he felt, yeah.
Yeah. So... You know, Mike establishes with everyone, like, we all have to go out and find our different, you know, tokens of the past or whatever. And I like this idea. It's cool and interesting. And, like, it gives the characters some freedom to, like, go off on their own and explore. And we see a bit more of their backstory. And, you know, we have flashbacks of when they were kids, which is cool and interesting, but it definitely adds to the runtime. That's one of the big issues with it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how much of the movie you'd say was flashback, but there's a fair amount. Like, they established the clubhouse, which apparently was in the book.
That was in the book, and yeah.
But, like, was not in Chapter 1 at all.
Yeah, it felt like that was a big part of, like, when they were kids, it was where they would go. Because even in the miniseries, you see them building the dam and everything. Like, that's where they hung out. Whereas in the original movie, they didn't really go over it, you know?
Yeah. So, you know, everybody goes off, they have their flashbacks and stuff like that, and some of the things are cool and interesting, like, I really liked Richie's thing, like, facing the giant lumberjack thing, like, attacking him as a kid, like, and the little joke, oh, I brought a token from the arcade, ha ha ha, and, like, Eddie's thing was important and interesting, because he faces off against the leper in the pharmacy basement or whatever.
Except for that song choice.
Yeah, that was... Like, I didn't notice it at the time, but, like, our group, like, you and Margaret, and I forget if Terry said anything about it, but, like, you guys were just, like, they just did that because Deadpool.
That's how I felt. That's how all of us felt. You'll know, watch the movie, you'll know that exact moment. You'll be like...
Yeah.
Any other song?
But anyway, like everybody goes, gets their tokens, they come back together, and well, no, scratch that. They have some little small side things like, oh hey, Pennywise hasn't been in the movie since the very beginning. Let's have a little scene with him attacking a kid at a football game.
Yes. Yeah, it's just weird because it's like the whole first movie and this movie and the miniseries and the book and everything always builds off. He feeds off of your fear and everything and makes you fear him, and then he attacks. Whereas he meets this little girl underneath the bleachers and gives her a sob story about how he has no friends, makes her become friends with him, and says he can, cure her, take this thing that's ugly off of her face, and she's happy and she's relieved and everything. And then he kills her, and it was like she wasn't afraid. She was afraid to begin with, and you dissuaded this fear into relief and to happiness, and it just felt inconsistent.
Yeah, and then so we have bits like that, like extra things, because we also have Bill having to try and save this kid, that they met once at the restaurant, which honestly I love that opening bit. Like whenever they meet him at the Chinese restaurant, like. Kid just randomly says, to Richie, like, fun time's over or whatever. And he just, like, repeats it twice. And Richie's like, what the fuck did you just say to me, little kid? He's like, dude, it's from your show. Chill. It's like, oh, okay. Oh, I forgot about that. That was so clever. I gotta give them points for that.
And I love that commentary. Yeah, I don't write my own material. Like, just, yes.
But, Bill has to try and save this kid. And it doesn't go well, unfortunately. Again, this is the spoiler zone. Just remember. So, Bill rushes off to go to Nebel House by himself. How do you say it?
Nebolt Street.
Nebolt Street, my bad. But anyway, he rushes off by himself. The other losers are like, oh crap, Bill's like gone crazy. He's gonna go down there by himself. And they meet up.
Well, he went to the fun house.
Right.
Yeah.
But like...
Which, a quick thing I just have to add, that was so much padding, because that storyline didn't happen. That was like, hey, we built the carnival set, we have to use it again. Yeah. And him going in, and I hate going to spoilers, but like, him bashing his head against the glass for like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And the kid didn't decide to run, like, yeah, maybe he's in shock or whatever.
Yeah.
But Bill didn't run either. It's like, so you have conquered this thing a couple of times, and now you're just gonna stand here and watch the kid get eaten.
Yeah,
that was just that was so much padding.
Yeah,
so, go ahead. I'm sorry, Nebolt Street.
Yeah, but like, so Bill rushes from the funhouse to Nebolt Street, and everybody else meets him up like outside of the house. Like, if it would have been like, oh, Bill's in the house and like, he's getting attacked by it, that could have been something. But oh no, crap, Bill's separate from everyone else, and everybody has to come back together. Hey, he's outside the house, because we had to have this little side story that took up
20 minutes, 15 minutes?
Something like that, yeah. And, that time could have cut down. But anyway, they get in the house, they face off with this, they're exploring the house, and they face off with it in a very creepy, like, spider-like, like, if you've seen the... Do you remember what year the Thing came out?
80s.
Yeah, it was the 80s. But basically, it was a quick homage to that. Imagine a human head with, like, spider legs coming off of it.
That was a good homage. I give it that.
So, like, they face off with that thing before they have to go down deeper, into the caves to where it ultimately lives. And, they perform the ceremony. They get to wherever it lives or something. I forget exactly. And they do the ceremony of Chud ritual.
Yep.
And, like, here's, again, touching on, like you said earlier with Mike, like, he kind of, like, it doesn't work entirely. Like, yeah, it brings it down there, but, according to Mike, this was supposed to kill it. Yeah. Or destroy it or whatever. Yeah. And, like, like you said earlier, this touches on, he lied to them. Like, oh... Like, they couldn't do this 1,000 years ago, or however long it was.
Yeah, I don't remember.
But, like, us, we can do it because we believe. It's like, are you kidding me?
Especially because Pennywise is the one that tells them, you didn't tell them, Mike, that this didn't work, that this wasn't going to work, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And if that had been enough, it would have been fine, because it would have been like, okay, he's an unreliable narrator of these past events. He's trying to put doubt in these people. but then you see the side of the container, and you see a flashback of Mike scratching everything off, showing that it failed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, so now Pennywise is the truth teller, and Mike is the bad guy in this particular conversation. That's one thing, like I said, to go back to earlier, is it just very annoyed me, is they made Mike into like a bad guy throughout these several events, and it was like unnecessary.
Yeah, and so we get into the final climactic battle. Like, everyone gets separated off because it did that. Like, we have some groupings of people, like Eddie and Richie, are together. Ben and Bev are together because they have a romantic relationship, and like, if you've seen the miniseries, I believe they ended up together there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's accurate to the book or not.
It is.
Yeah. Which is good, and I do like their characters. Like, they were good, and but if you've seen the miniseries, unfortunately, one of our characters is about to be killed off, and I thought the way they did this was. It was different, but it was good.
It was better than the miniseries, by far.
Basically, Eddie is unfortunately killed off. As they were climbing down into the place, he was scared. Like, there are 6 adults facing off against this reality-bending monster. And Bev gives him, this, like, fence post or whatever, that like, this metal fence post, and she tells him, like, this can kill monsters. And I think he's, like, repeating it as they're climbing down into the thing. And, like, he gets his chance, and he throws it, like, into the open mouth, into the deadlights of the monster. And it just, like, it hurts it badly, obviously. And then you have that cliche, horror movie moment of, yes, I got him!
Yeah.
He stopped! And then, unfortunately, just, boom.
See, I liked that because it was good. Because in the book also, and in the miniseries, Eddie dies in both those ones. But this one, he got a truly heroic death.
Mm-hmm.
Like whereas the other two, I will say, I think in this one he got a better one.
Yeah, because like in the miniseries, just to reach back to that, several of the guys were hypnotized by the deadlights of the giant weird spider crab creature. So Eddie rushes forward with his inhaler.
Yeah.
Because in the miniseries, they established, this stuff tastes like battery acid.
Yeah, that's his weapon.
So he tried using it, and he gets grabbed, and they didn't even show like anything graphic in the miniseries thing. He's just like up in the air, being maybe squeezed, and he's dead.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
and his life's gone.
Yeah. But like this thing, with the metal fence post and the inhaler thing, I like because it seems like one of the big themes for the story, and this is my look at it, is, fear versus, like, faith or belief. Like, if you believe, you can stand up to this monster, this evilness, this bad darkness, you stand a better chance. Or, like, you can overcome difficulties.
If I can scroll back a little bit, because I like that point, I agree with that point.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, scrolling back to earlier in the movie, you have this whole thing about, fear and belief. In the original, in like the book, we see that Stanley's a Boy Scout, he's got his bird book, and that's what he puts his faith in and everything. And then whenever they change it for the second part of this movie, like the part 1 of this movies, and he's Jewish and he's going to read the Quran and become a man and everything. That was awesome, like his bar mitzvah and everything. I'm like, this is awesome. They're going to use that, and they're going to utilize it, like fear versus belief. And he's got this thing like, God is on my side, you cannot stop me or whatever. And then they kind of just do the same thing the miniseries did and the same thing the book did.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just unnecessary.
Yeah, I mean, like, the only addition they really had was the Native American law or whatever. Like, I forget the exact wording of it, but I think it was, the you must obey the laws of your shape or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, basically, if you're an old woman, you have to be, you have to have the characteristics of an old woman. Even though you're this intergalactic monster. Like,
yeah, you're the shape over the body.
Like, the Losers...
You've got its weakness.
Yeah, the Losers Club was, like, they had to 100% believe you were a clown, you were an old woman, you were a this, you were a that, in order for it to lose its power.
Yep.
So, like, again, that ties back to the fear versus, faith or belief thing. And also, I honestly didn't think about, like, the whole Stanley being Jewish thing, because one of the other big things is, childhood and adulthood. Like, because they have they do their own transition in the book.
And to put a capper on my note, like if he had no longer been Jewish or if he'd lost his faith or something, if they'd established that in his little segment, that would have been interesting. Like you could have won, but you know you did not. Like I'm not saying they should have done it or not. I'm just saying they set up this thing in part one, and then didn't have any follow through. It was like, hey, let's change this so we're, doing something different, but we're not going to pay off it.
Yeah. So, we get to the final fight, like, we believe you are just a small clown. You are nothing. You are weak. And it does weaken it to the point where they can finally, literally take its heart out and crush it and destroy it finally. And that's cool and interesting. They did that in the miniseries, but I like this version better. And, like, so, we get past that. Unfortunately, another cliche comes up. Oh no, we defeated the bad guy. Now the whole place is coming down. We got to get out of here.
Yes.
And it sucks because Eddie just died here, obviously, and they quickly established here Eddie and Richie got close. Like they had a little bit in the caves when everyone got separated.
Yeah.
And it sucks that they couldn't bring Eddie out.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen them carrying his body out so he could get a proper funeral or something, but it's kind of like, we have to leave him, we have to get out of here.
Yeah. But, it makes sense because, and I haven't read the book, but, I've heard about how as they're doing the fight, there's, this big storm in Derry, and, Derry's ultimately pretty much destroyed
yes.
because of this conflict. Basically, if you haven't read the book, Derry gets pretty messed up after this fight between the group, so... This is kind of like a smaller version of that, but like you did a minute ago, adding on a bit to what they could have done in the movie. It would have been a cool thing, everybody's there for Eddie's funeral, before they have to part ways. We did it.
Yeah.
Thank you. They could have added it. It wasn't necessary, but it would have been a cool little cap off for thanks guys.
The thing with everything being destroyed, and like you said, they're trying the trope of we need to get out of here or whatever. They get to the surface and everything's fine. And it's kind of annoying because it's wherever they are, the cavern explodes, then the quarry or whatever that is, the sewer system explodes, and then the house on Nebold Street explodes, and then everything's fine. And it's if all these things are interconnected and all these things are exploding or whatever, in the book, they go over the aftermath of manhole covers are flying into the air because there's an earthquake that's shattering the entire town. This was it was the base of the town. It was holding everything together. And as soon as it dies, everything falls apart and it crumbles and there's aftershocks of it. Whereas the movie, it's oh, thank God we got out of the house just in time. It's a good thing that was a self-contained thing and it only affected this.
Right.
Which I think they had too much padding and there's interesting things like that they could have done. There is an aftermath, and you could say maybe there is, but then we see Mike driving out, whenever he goes to leave town, and the main part's fine. You see Bev and Ben, the main part's fine. There's no aftershock, and that's what I think was another thing where they miss an opportunity.
Yeah. So they wrapped everything up. Everyone goes their separate ways, and one of the final things that I remember is, Bill's at home. He calls Mike or gets a call from Mike. I forget. It's hey, it was good seeing you again. I'm glad we got through this. So what are you going to do now that everything's over, Mike? And, Mike saying, I've been here 27 years. I'm going to finally get to travel like I wanted to do. And, Mike mentions, oh, hey, did you get the letter yet? And it leads to, just a quick thing. Some could argue it's a nice little cap-off for Stanley's story arc, because it was unfortunately very short in Chapter 2. And, Patrick, I know you have some thoughts about it, so...
I did not like it. Like I said, like he said, some people did like it. And whenever we first watched it, I was like, wow, that was really good. Because what it is we see Mike and Bev and everyone got a letter from Stanley about how he was taking himself off of the board because he knew he wouldn't have the strength to go fight it a second time after his experiences when they were kids.
Hey everyone, unfortunately we had some technical difficulties. Basically the camera turned off after 30 minutes of not doing anything besides record us, which is dumb. So I'm going to finish up Pat's thoughts, give our reviews, and go from there. So basically, where Patrick left off, he was talking about how Stanley took himself off of the board. Basically he killed himself, which is very, very bad. I know a person who's unfortunately gone through with that. Patrick knows at least another person or two who's gone through with that, and he didn't care for how it kind of, they tried to make it noble, like, oh, hey, I took myself out so I could save all of you. It's like, no. That is not. Okay? And, I have to agree with him on that. But there are some people who might be like, no, it was a noble thing. And, like, that's one of those things that's going to be controversial and people might talk about this movie. Or they might not. Because, Patrick's thoughts were this movie wasn't very great. And I thought it was good. There are just a lot of things that take it down. Mainly the length. Like, they could have cut so much filler stuff. They could have done some things differently. So, it's a solid movie, but if you compare it to the book, it pales in comparison. Comparing it to the first movie, like, it pales in comparison. So, yeah. But that was pretty much it. So, glorifying Stan's suicide was not really great. It does have some good, interesting things, I thought. The collecting the tokens was a cool, interesting idea. It did, add in some flashbacks to when they were kids. Which is cool and interesting, but the kid, this is 2 years later. The kids are grown up. And I loved Patrick's, final point on this. Like, this movie was basically, just short of the potential. Like, they made the first one, they didn't think about, like, oh, hey, we need to incorporate, the clubhouse. We need to do some of these different things. So they had to, do the reshoots with the younger cast 2 years later. When they're a bit different, because kids grow like that. So, he gave it a 2, and that was being generous. Again, he's being very critical, and I don't blame him for that. He read the books, and honestly, comparing this to, the book and what potential there was, it falls short. Me, I gave it at least a 3. Like, it's a good, solid story. It's just dragged down by the elements within the movie itself. The filler, the weird comedy, the stuff they could have just left on the cutting room floor, but they didn't for whatever reason. I hope everyone enjoyed the video. I want to thank Patrick for showing up and taking part in these videos. We may touch on Resident Evil 2 again now that I've gotten to play it a bit more in depth. Because that's a big game for our childhood. And also, October is spooky time, so you gotta talk about spooky stuff. And this year, I don't have any ideas. And I also didn't really have many plans besides getting back on track with Doctor Who, whenever that ultimately is. And again, in relation to that, life's been stressful and I've been burned out. So I haven't been able to get on track with recording videos, but this could be the thing that gets me back on track. It's because Patrick was so insistent, hey, we should do this, because he had a lot to say about the movie, that, I'm recording again. So, maybe soon, the month of the Third Doctor might be a bit off the schedule, but, it might be coming now. And I have Patrick to thank for that. Those are his books really quick. He's not here because he had to leave because he had to go to work. And I wanted to get this done while everything was still fresh in my mind. So, again, thank you for watching. Thank you, Patrick, for showing up, bringing your cool books. So we have some nice little props. And I will catch all of you next time. So, until then, have fun. Stay safe. Keep hydrated. And, of course, remember, every character has a story to tell. I'm Valiant Bradley James. He was Patrick, the Patman. Oh. And we'll catch you again at the movies.